want to welcome everybody. My name is Carla Brown, and I'm the Director for Partnerships and Operations at the National Peace Corps Association. I served in the Comoro Islands from 1992 to 1994. It is a real pleasure to be here with everyone. And in particular, I just want to greet my colleagues at the National Peace Corps Association. Dan Baker is on the line, and there are a few others. Oren is on the line, and he's supporting us with the technical areas. Thank you so much for being here. I would also like to introduce or welcome our Peace Corps colleagues, because this is in partnership with the Peace Corps. We have Andrew Wilson on the line, and he's the director of the Third Goal in Returned Volunteer Services. We have Heather Thompson, who's program specialist for Global Connections, the Office of the Third Goal. And we also have two very special colleagues who are going to be speaking to you today on behalf of the Peace Corps. So I am going to go ahead and introduce both of those colleagues. We have Mr. Mark Vander Vort. He was a RPCV in the Congo, former Zaire. He is currently the Chief Operations for the Europe and Asia region. He has over 30 years of experience in international development, and that includes 20 plus years as a country director himself, as well as 5 years supervising country directors. He has been a campus recruiter. He's been an associate Peace Corps director in Gabon. So clearly he has a little bit of Peace Corps experience. He has also worked for organizations such as CARE, Africare, International Rescue Committee, Chemonics, World Vision, and CMMB. So we welcome you very much, and we know you're going to provide some really rich and interesting conversation. We also have Lina Al-Husseini, and she's the current country director in Morocco. I'm going to pass it over to her to give a little more about her background before we jump right into the presentation. Again, welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Carla. And I'm so happy to be here, and hello to everyone. And I'm seeing lots of Morocco RPCVs, so I'm really happy to be here with everyone. So I have around 28 years in international development as well. So I come by way of the United Nations. I ran child welfare in Oregon, protection, worked very in settlement houses and immigrants and refugees. And I'm so happy to be here and feel very privileged to be the country director for Morocco. So thank you, Carla.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I believe we're going to start with Mark, right? Are you going to be the first one? And okay.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carla. And just as in transparency, Carla and I used to work together at CMMB some few years ago, although more than a few, I guess. But thanks, Carla. So yeah, EMA or EMA stands for Europe, Mediterranean, and Asia. And in Europe, we have about, maybe go to the next slide. In Europe, we have about 8 posts, depending if you count Ukraine or not. Lena's our only M, so it should probably be Europe, Morocco, and Asia. But since we left Jordan and Tunisia, it's just Morocco right now. Peace Corps divides the world into 3 kind of geographic regions. Africa is pretty much straightforward. It's just Africa. IAP is Inter-America and Pacific, and then EMA is, again, the Europe, Mediterranean, Asia region. So maybe next slide. So our motto is the sun never sets in EMA, if you count the team that supports them in Washington, D.C. Right now, we have about 18 posts, depending how you count a post or a country. Ukraine is still a question mark, and we're going to move forward. Just starting Palau. So that's something I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, very, very spread out geographically and time zone wise. So very exciting to go travel and visit these places, but also a challenge in terms of communicating with the teams there because of time zone challenges. Africa keeps trying to steal Morocco back from us, but we're not letting it go. Maybe next slide, please. So it's hard to talk about where we are now without going back maybe 4-something years at the pandemic. because it really altered Peace Corps in so many different ways. So I remember distinctly in January 2020, when the country director in China called us and said, hey, and this was the team in DC, we need to evacuate now. This was the very beginning of the pandemic. We were a bit skeptical at the time, but so the whole China team, I think 140 some odd volunteers evacuated to Thailand to do a COS conference. And then it slowly continued, Philippines, Mongolia, Albania. And then eventually it became the whole world in mid-March 2020, when the director made a decision, no more training classes, and we're evacuating everyone in all countries, because airspace was starting to get clogged up. Airplanes weren't allowed to go here, there, and everywhere. And so the decision was made to get the volunteers out safe and sound. Probably arguably one of Peace Corps' most challenging moments, but also one of its best, because we evacuated something like 7,000 volunteers in 7 days, which was pretty remarkable. And everybody got back home safely at that time. Immediately following the evacuation, we never let any staff go. We kept our full contingent of U.S. Direct hires and our local staff. So they kept working. A lot of posts took the opportunity to move offices to something that was more modern, and that where we could kind of green our operations a bit. So a lot of solar panels were installed. We bought EV cars, and just try to get caught up in terms of, without volunteers in the field, and things that we could do to prepare for their return. Some posts took the opportunity to maybe recalibrate their staffing sizes and to reassess what they wanted to focus on programmatically. Also during that 2-year hiatus, because of the junta in Myanmar, we had to close that. We had to close China, and then the war in Ukraine started. Ukraine's not 100% completely closed yet. I can talk about that later, but Myanmar and China are completely closed right now. Even so, during that period, we opened up Peace Corps Vietnam. First, I think it was 100, right below it says Montenegro. That was our 143rd country. It's a sub-office of Albania. Vietnam was our 144th country. And then we reopened Sri Lanka. So Peace Corps got volunteers back there late last year. So it's great that we have volunteers back in Sri Lanka. More recently, we just did a new country assessment to reopen our presence in Uzbekistan, where we had a pretty huge presence in the past. Gigantic country, and budget permitting, but we'll try to reopen that in the years ahead. But that has a lot of, I think a lot of the government there is exceptionally supportive and really wants a program there. So it'll be primarily, I think, money driven. And we're currently reopening Palau, which will be basically a sub office based out of Manila. And we already have one American on the ground starting to work with the government. Interestingly, and almost bizarrely, the Minister of Education is an American citizen. So it's kind of a unique place. There's only 20,000 people there, so it'll be a very modest program. And we'll probably start off with third-year transferees, like the IP region's doing for El Salvador, which is also opening up these days. Yeah, so Myanmar is closed indefinitely. China's closed likely forever. Ukraine will probably take a long time to reopen. We do have a presence there. Maybe 15, I think it's now 15 staff, local staff. All the US staff have left, but there is a contingent there that's doing virtual service programming in Ukraine. Another thing about Vietnam, for the agreement with the government of Vietnam, we're only allowed to have volunteers in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh provinces, and we're limited to 20 volunteers a year. We're hoping that with time, that we'll be able to prove that we say that there's a little bit of skepticism and suspicion about Peace Corps. So we hope that down the road, whether it take a year or 2 or 3, that they'll appreciate that Peace Corps is doing what it says it was going to do and open up other districts, provinces, and increase the numbers of volunteers. Interesting side thing about Montenegro, that did open before the pandemic. The first group was in their 10th week of pre-service training when the pandemic hit and had to evacuate before they actually officially swore in, though they were kind of formally sworn in just so they had that under their belt. Okay, maybe next slide. So besides the normal 2-year volunteer program, we have other things that we're doing. Peace Corps response is growing. For those of you who have been around the block a few years, it's kind of comes from what was Crisis Corps back in the day. And so we have a bunch of Peace Corps response volunteers in Georgia, Kyrgyz Republic, and Nepal especially. Philippines has always had a big response program. That I'm sure that will grow. But they're kind of one-off assignments and can vary in length of service from 3 to 9 to 12 months. And that's something that was really popular as we got volunteers back in the field. But now with getting the 2-year volunteers back, it'd probably be a little bit more modest because it's a lot of extra work with a whole nother pre-service training and all that. Other things that we're really focused on in EMA is really encouraging a 3rd year at post, and having like Mongolia of all places, they have 12, which is amazing. But almost all posts are getting volunteers who want to extend for a 3rd year, which is amazing, and we're really trying to encourage that. Also really trying to be much more active on encouraging between region or between country transfer programs. So if you do 2 years in whatever, Benin, and want to go to the Philippines, which just happened actually, we're trying to make that an easier process and not so crazy bureaucratically with medical clearances or legal clearances. So that's starting to work better. And then also in EMA, we're also working on some brand new programming areas. So Nepal has a new environment program that's just basically approved, and we'll start recruiting for that. Kyrgyz wants to do something similar. That's still in the development stage, and same with Morocco. And I'm sure Lena will talk a bit more about that. And then we have our startup in Palau, which will probably be just 8 or 9 transfer volunteers from who the heck knows right now, but hope to get 8 or 9 of them. And that will be focused on primary and secondary education. Next slide. So one thing that occurred during the evacuation and 2 years without volunteers was what we call the virtual service pilot program. And these are, at the time, farmer volunteers who had an affinity with their host country and were able to provide distant educational lessons and stuff. And that was really, really popular for quite some time. As you can see in that map, almost every single post in EMA was participating. A recent change is it used to be limited to former Peace Corps volunteers. Now it can be any U.S. citizen. I'm sure there'll be more announcements about that coming forward. But it was just an incredible way to continue kind of the presence in education and whatnot during the pandemic. And Ukraine is still very focused on that because we're not going to get volunteers back there anytime soon. So VSP now, as we're calling it, is a very important part of our presence in Ukraine. Next slide, I think. So yeah, we're just almost reaching 3,000 volunteers post-pandemic. The first group of volunteers that got back are just starting to COS. So it's just basically 2 years in. So it's just a tad less than 3,000. So that includes volunteers, response volunteers, and trainees. And EMA is now back in every post that we evacuated, except for the ones that are closed. And then with the new ones in Vietnam and Sri Lanka and Montenegro. Interestingly, Philippines, which is a popular post has now reached post or above pre-pandemic numbers. I think it's at 125, which is wonderful. And I know Morocco's doing really well too, and Lena can talk about that. Some of our posts are having trouble recruiting, and so we're working on that. And again, like I mentioned, the third-year requests are just way more than I can remember. Working on that. But like I said, a challenging place like Mongolia to get 12 extendees is pretty amazing. So really encouraging that. And then just that last bullet there, just, there's 240,000 volunteers that have served and worked overseas. There might be movement to open up other places in the world down the road, but right now, just in terms of EMA, we're really focused Palau, maybe Uzbekistan in the future, and we'll take it from there. Next slide. So if we have an ask for you guys that are on the call, is just to reach out to people you know, family, friends, community workers, colleagues, their kids, whatever, to get Peace Corps. We're having trouble recruiting, to be frank. And so anything you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated. We'd like to get back up to our pre-pandemic numbers, which were around 7,000. So it's been a bit of a slog, but we're forging ahead. And then Heather, do you want to just speak a little bit to the Each One Reach One campaign, which I think is the next slide?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name's Heather. Just wanted to touch briefly on this Each One Reach One campaign that we're running right now with Peace Corps. The idea of this is that each one of us as an RPCV can connect with one person in our network, maybe a friend's son or daughter, or a coworker, or a teacher that we know, or someone in our network might be interested in joining the Peace Corps if we give them that nudge and give them a little bit more information. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat that has a toolkit. It's sort of like an online toolkit where you can find flyers that you could print out and put up in your library, about joining the Peace Corps. It also has some social media posts that you could grab and use, post on your LinkedIn, post on, Instagram, Facebook. And it also has a lot of informational sheets on there so that you can kind of brush up on one of the benefits of Peace Corps. How do you apply? We're asking each RPCV to be a little bit of an informal recruiter, if you will, and see if you can spread the word in your network. So I'll drop the link for that. We can answer questions about this after if anyone has any, but I would like to pass it next over to Lena so that we can hear more about what's happening in Peace Corps Morocco.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. And I see quite a few RPCVs from Morocco, so I think they probably know much more than me. But if there's anything I neglect to mention, just drop me a line and I'll try to answer it. So next slide, please, Heather. So my agenda for today, I'm going to talk a little bit about PC Morocco through the decades, a little bit about our COVID-19 response, and the earthquake September last year. Next, please. So Peace Corps Morocco is one of the oldest, I believe, with the Peace Corps. Post was opened on February 10th, 1963. A plane left New York's Idlewild Airport with 53 surveyors, English teachers, and irrigation volunteers, and 3 more volunteers joined the group. This first group of volunteers received their stateside training at California State Polytechnic College, which consisted of technical subjects, American studies, and French language instruction. Next slide, please. So it's our 62nd anniversary next year. We'll be hopefully doing something with that as well. From 1963 to 1973, we focused here in Morocco on several key sectors, including education, free school, agriculture, rural development, physical education, teacher training, urban development, and public works. Next slide, please. During the 70s and 80s, Peace Corps Morocco expanded its engagement in Morocco with a diverse range of sectors. Volunteers worked in forestry, zootechnology, vocational education, marine and inland fisheries, range management, math instruction, rehabilitation, social services, energy, rural water supply, and wildlife conservation. And I'm going to get to it later, but we're now down to one sector, and we're hoping to expand, but I'll talk about that next. So next, please, Heather. In the 90s, the Peace Corps continued its commitment to Morocco's development in various sectors. So we continued with education, social services, English for specific purposes. Like, for instance, currently, they're very interested in English for tourism. So agriculture, environment, rural water supply, small business development, and youth development. And then the early 90s was also marked by the first evacuation in the last 33 years. And then later in April of 2003, PC Morocco was again suspended because of the events in Iraq at the time, because of the conflict. Next. So between 2000 and 2012, we had 4 sectors, which is small business development and working on the environmental preservation, health, and youth development project. Next, please. In the present era from 2012, the focus has been primarily on youth development. So over the past 11 years, we've had a partnership with the Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Communication. So Peace Corps volunteers during this period have served as youth development volunteers and mainly working with the Dar Shababs, youth centers, and Nadi Niswe women's centers as well. And that has continued to this day. Next, please. So currently, Peace Corps Morocco, as I mentioned, works with the Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Communication, and mostly on youth development. Our Peace Corps volunteers are actively engaged in working with youth centers, women's centers, and other institutions, including schools and centers under Trade National. The different focus areas for our volunteers are strengthening the life skills of youth through co-facilitating classes, youth clubs, camps, and recreational activities. So this is a whole wide range, from soccer clubs to chess clubs to reading clubs to even programming and game theory. So it could be anything, but our volunteers are very creative and very good at what they do. Increasing youth community engagement with skills through co-facilitating splash activities, volunteerism, and service learning activities, and co-planning and co-implementing community-oriented projects. And finally, increasing the ability of youth to communicate in English through facilitating classes, clubs, and camps. Next, please. So during COVID-19, in March 2020, we evacuated 183 PCVs with the help of the embassy. And I believe the embassy I wasn't the CD at the time, it was Sue Dwyer, and I believe the embassy helped us with the transportation and the flights and all of that. So we're very grateful for the US Embassy here in Morocco. During that time, we began utilizing social media to share and promote PCV's work and talking about youth-related resources and organizing sort of live events. We joined the virtual service pilot, which Mark just talked about earlier, and we launched the staff-led activities. There were 24 staff in 7 regions who were contributing to the COVID programming framework. Next, please. So September 2022, we welcomed our first stage post-COVID, stage 1 or 2, and we had 50 volunteers who were assigned to all regions of Morocco. Next, please. So September 2023, we had a devastating earthquake. Just so you guys know, I arrived on the 1st of September. So this was like 7 days into me being here in Morocco. So like many of the countries where Peace Corps works, we've experienced more frequent natural disasters. Unfortunately, on September 8th, 2023, the country was devastated by the El House earthquake, which killed nearly 3,000 people and affected more than 2.8 million individuals in Marrakesh and the areas surrounding the Atlas Mountains. It was truly tragic. It really affected all our volunteers. We were very lucky. All our volunteers were safe. We had to, I think only one volunteer had to change her site because her site was severely affected. But we were very lucky. No volunteers. No one in our community had been hurt. Of course, other than displacement, but that's easy. We can always rehouse people. So on September 10th, 2023, 64 volunteer trainees arrived as part of stage 1 of 3. So like 2 days after the devastating earthquake. And I mean, I was so impressed because they knew about the earthquake and everybody showed up, and they showed up and ready to work and ready to help and to serve. So it was so inspiring for me and for all the team here. Next, please. And I want to give you an example. We have PCV David. David is stage 102. So he's from the first stage that arrived post-COVID. So he is in the area that was highly affected. So after the earthquake, he worked with his community to mobilize rapid disaster response. He helped collect relief materials and distributing them to victims in the Azlal province. This response involved a core group of 43 community members, including youth volunteers, which resulted in the distribution of 5 cargo trucks filled with food supplies and essential aid materials like blankets and clothing to those most affected. And as PCV David reflects, the experience and connections made between volunteers in this project will enable the community to come together similarly and more quickly should another disaster occur. So we're very grateful to David and many of our volunteers for all their amazing work and their service here every day, and especially during the earthquake. I mean, it was amazing. And next September, we're hoping we'll be getting stage 104, and we're expecting around 70 volunteers. So thank you, everyone. Next, yes, thank you. And I see lots of questions. Nice. Yes, and hello to all RPCVs from Morocco. And oh, you knew Sue. So I came just after Sue. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena, and thank you, Mark. We're going to open up the floor now for some questions. So if you have questions that you would like to start putting in the chat. I saw one question earlier asking about, and I think this is a question for you, Mark. Why was China evacuated and still closed? Was it just the pandemic or was there something else?
The initial evacuation was definitely related to the pandemic in January 2020. It was our first post to be evacuated. I think the plan was to eventually close it, and the plan was to let volunteers serving there continue until they actually COS'd. But because everybody left, it just wasn't ever reopened like almost all our other posts were.
Thank you.
And the decision was way above my pay grade.
Yeah. Thank you. What other questions do we have for our presenters? It's your chance to get some inside information on the region. Feel free to also use the raise hand icon if you'd like to ask a question.
I believe Doug has their hand raised. Doug Teschner.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this call as a Morocco RPCV. I appreciate that update. And I was also country director, and I was an expert briefly in Morocco. But my real focus today is about Ukraine. I was country director there from 2010 to 2014, which was the first time that Putin had invaded and after the Maidan revolution there. And and I had to evacuate the volunteers, which was incredibly painful to do. Of course, Ukraine did eventually reopen, but it was always a very, very strong post. In fact, we had over 500 volunteers at one point when I was there. We're all heartbroken about what's been happening in Ukraine and the situation there. And I'd just like to get more of an update. I know a lot of the staff were laid off, which is terribly painful. And I know the program has been operating to some extent out of Moldova. I mean, the virtual service, by the way, we really initiated that after the first evacuation in 2014. A lot of our volunteers were doing that work. And I'd just like to hear more about the status of the Ukraine staff and what Peace Corps has been able to do to support those folks and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Maybe I can take that, Heather. I think at the start of the invasion and post-COVID, there was roughly 54 local staff and 3 to 4 American staff. They were all evacuated, the American staff, at the start of COVID. The 54 local staff remained. We continued to engage them. But as the war continued and the focus became more staff-led activities and virtual service, that number was dropped down. I think we're at about 15 right now, Doug. So that's where we stand right now. It is being managed out of Peace Corps Moldova. And we're just hopeful that, it's going to take a while before we can ever return, I'm sure. But it used to be during the evacuation, the poor team there had to take, we were hoping to get a charter flight given the size of the post. They had to go to the airport, I think, 3 times with like 350 volunteers, only to have the charter not show up. And I'm sure you can imagine how difficult it is to move 300 and some odd volunteers with all their luggage to an airport, only to have it returned. So very awkward situation. It continues to be right now, but we do have about 15 staff. We did have a lot of TDYs for the more experienced staff during the pandemic and beyond. But yeah, we're down to about, I think it's about 15 right now, Doug.
I appreciate that. You got some great people there, really dedicated, and as we do in all of our countries, but some very, very talented people in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a question here for Lena. Is there any plan to do Peace Corps response for the education sector in Morocco?
So we currently don't have an education sector per se. We are only working on youth development. But like Mark mentioned, we're currently in the development stage of adding a new sector, which could be we're between 2 currently, which is either the environment or let me remember the name of the ministry. The artisanal ministry, so really working on small business development and helping local Moroccans and sort of empowering them in their artisanal crafts industry. So we're not sure which one of these we're going to be doing. However, we're also partnering next year with the Core Africa, and part of that we might have a Peace Corps response volunteers. So we'll keep you posted. We're hoping to do that next year, but currently we don't have Peace Corps response. Did that answer the question? I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna go to one other question for you, Lena, which is from Natalie. And I don't know, Natalie, if you want to explain this a little bit more, that you are trying to see how to maybe get a volunteer or back into the site where you served. They don't have one right now.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, it was just that I didn't know. I know there's lots of reasons why a site might be closed, maybe something with the Dar Shabab or the Mudir or what have you, safety and security. I just, personally am invested. And, I was the first volunteer in that site for youth development in 2014. And I've heard from contacts still there that there's now no Peace Corps presence there. So just curious, if there is someone I could talk to about just recommending to send a volunteer there, or why there's no current presence there.
Right. Can you tell me where the site is or the name of the site?
Or I can, yeah.
Or
And
send it
you
to
know,
me.
I totally understand if this is a personal, if you
I
don't
can
want to
I
take up
can-
time now, but
Sure. If you contact
Sorry?
me, I'm happy to look into it and discuss further. Do you need, I can put my email
okay.
up here.
Okay,
Does that
that's
sound
great.
good?
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
The site is very far away. It's in Akairan, like an
Ah.
hour from Tata, very far
Okay.
south. So
Okay.
it might be part of the reason why there's no presence there right now. But it was a great site. So just looking out for the people there.
No, thank you for that. I'm gonna look into it. And then you recommended it, so, and we have 70 new volunteers coming. So yeah, I'll definitely check in on that. I'm sending you also in the chat my email if you want to reach out.
Thank you so much, Lena.
Thank you.
All right, Mark, I think this question is for you. What are the Peace Corps' resources and policies now around mental health care? You know, I think since the pandemic, there's been more of a realization of how important mental health care is. And where's the Peace Corps at with that right now? And is there any policies that come up around mental health during the application process?
So, great question. And having 3 teenagers myself, feel this is quite an important thing. So, for those people on the call that were around way back in the day, we didn't have much of that. There's now a regional mental health officer in each region who can take calls. The Peace Corps medical office in every post has a little bit more training in these kind of things. And there's also assets at HQ and sometimes third-party places for volunteers to reach out to. There's a lot more screening about it than there was in the past too. So it is something that's definitely, I think the younger generation's much more honest about mental health issues. So it's something that the agency is trying to work through. On one hand, to get more volunteers back, but not to bar someone from coming back because they're being open and honest. So it's a huge issue right now for sure. But I think we're starting to deploy resources overseas and then build up stuff at HQ as well.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, that's really important. And I'm glad that Peace Corps is keeping pace. Another question for you, Mark, is what is the process for maybe applying to virtual service and then training for virtual service? Is the training in person? Is it also virtual? You're unmute, Mark.
Sorry.
Right.
I can try to find the link for that. But what's changed is any American, before I just returned volunteers, any American now provide, that virtual service kind of programming. Would want to say though that it's time zone wise, especially for our far-flung Asia post, that the timing is given time zones, it's a bit challenging. But if people want to do it, we can definitely work on that. And thanks, Heather, for putting that link in there. And that's something we want to continue to grow. Had great success with it during the post evacuation, and it's something I think that we can continue, and most posts do want to continue doing.
That's great. Thank you. What other questions do we have?
There seems to be a little more follow-up on the mental health question.
Alana, would you like to maybe come off mute and just address a little bit more what you were wondering about?
Yes, sure. Sorry, I had to find the buttons. I'm sorry about that. I've been on a lot of college campuses lately, and so the mental health question comes up a lot with the younger generation. And so hearing that there's a regional mental health coordinator is fantastic. That's great to hear. I'm hoping that somewhere down the road, eventually there'll be one at every post. I'm guessing that for us volunteers who were volunteers in the earlier years, all of us would have appreciated having had somebody with some mental health training in the capital that you could go to if you needed it. But these kids are asking me about, you know, when I was in high school, I was on Prozac, or when we have suicide attempts. We have all these kinds of things in people's history, and it's a lot of people. So this is not, and you know, you have your teenagers. So you know, I have two teenagers, and this is not the exception anymore. And so people are asking me, I'm considering applying to the Peace Corps. I want to know what the mental health options are. And the first few times I got that question as being, you know, an early 90s volunteer, it's like, mental health. No, it's all very limited. But hearing that Peace Corps is catching up on that is great. I also want to be careful not to discourage somebody from applying, but I don't want to encourage people to apply who guaranteed will not have a chance to get in, because that would just add to their mental health woes, to then be punished for their mental health history. So I actually have come across somebody who said that they were denied application in the Peace Corps because they had had mental health issues in high school that had gotten resolved while they were in high school, and now they've gone through college and had, you know, were stronger because they had done all that, and then got denied by the Peace Corps because of that. And of course, the whole process is so discouraging for them because they got their invitation pending medical clearance and then were denied.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the medical clearance process as well as the legal clearance process can be better. Even the recruitment process can be obviously much more improved. In the past, just, you know, we really relied on COSing volunteers to fill some of those positions because they could get a job with Peace Corps at an entry-level position with the non-competitive eligibility. That hasn't happened for pretty much 4 years now. Having said that, though, the medical clearance process is just way out of Region's hands. It's going to be assessed by mental health professionals or medical professionals. So we have people clearing who are older that have had cancer, and they're completely, you know, asymptomatic. And we've had people clear that have had past mental health crises and clear. But it's up to the nurses to do that clearance process to decide the severity of the issue. And I don't want to get too far out of my lane, but because I do have teenagers, but I'm no expert. So you can always, if someone applies and doesn't pass, they can always appeal. But
Yeah.
usually it's thoughtful. Some places where volunteers serve, and if the applicant is on some kind of mental health drug that's required every day or every week or whatever, and that's not sendable, for lack of a better term, to that post because of it being considered a narcotic or a controlled substance, that might also be of concern. There might be places, so like, let's say the volunteer, I'm just making this up, you have a volunteer who had a mental health crisis when they were a teenager and really wants to go to, again, just making this up, Albania. And Albania has really tight rules about importing drugs. That might be a no-go, but that doesn't mean that he or she couldn't go to perhaps another post if they'd want that. But I'll be honest, I'm speculating because we're not as kind of the, you know, the administrative operational side of EMA, we're not at all involved in the mental health, medical, legal part of the application process at all.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But we see,
But
we
as far
see
as
a lot of
support,
people being, we see a lot of what they call non-medically cleared. And that's part of our recruitment challenge right now.
all right.
Thank you so much, Mark. Really
you.
appreciate your insight. I think we have 2 more questions here before we wrap up. So question from Tim, what is happening with Peace Corps partnerships? I'm curious about grant funds and cost sharing for Peace Corps projects.
I can give some general ideas on that. So like Peace Corps of Philippines just got, I think, something shy of $1 million from USAID to work on different programming areas. Peace Corps Nepal just got something close to that too for a new environment/agricultural project. Peace Corps Albania with Department of something, Interior, I don't know, just got tentative grant for additional partnerships. SPA's always there in most posts, so that's continuing and probably at a faster pace than in recent times, at least in EMA. And then PEPFAR in Africa region in particular, there's a lot of resources from PEPFAR. We have, oddly enough, our one PEPFAR post in EMA is Ukraine, which yeah.
Thank you. And then a question from Linda and Norma, are there any plans for India and maybe or Pakistan or Bangladesh? Oh, we lost you, Mark.
We need an invitation from the government. And then if it's accepted by our leaders, to create like a country agreement. We were in India. I'm not sure about Pakistan, I forget. I think we were also in Bangladesh, but Bangladesh, India and Pakistan have not reached out in recent times. Bangladesh has, but I think it's a no-go because of security concerns right now. So in terms of EMA, the ones being considered, funding permitted, permitting would be Palau, which has already started, and then Uzbekistan. That'd probably be next in our list. But ambassadors always call us. So we just had a meeting with the outgoing ambassador for Turkmenistan. She really wants to have Peace Corps, but we've never been there before, and we'd need a letter of invitation. We've had conversations with Laos, Jordan, a bunch of different places. But we need that letter of invitation from the government.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up here, Dan, I know you've got some questions. Would you like to hop on for a minute?
Sure. Sorry, I'm kind of on the move, so can't be on camera. But Mark, just from a each one reach one perspective, and really, let me just say thank you very much for your presentation today. I think it's been really refreshing and good to hear what EMA has been up to. You mentioned that you're struggling with some applications for some countries and maybe not so much for others. You mentioned that the Philippines, for example, is a maybe more desirable or more popular program. I'm sure VERS is doing a lot, recruitment is doing a lot to look into the trends, but are there anything you've identified as commonalities across the countries where you don't get as many applications from potential volunteers, and why people might not be interested in some countries compared to others?
That's an excellent question. I think initially I would say no. North Macedonia all of a sudden has this huge interest, which I hadn't had before. Kyrgyzstan, which is kind of, not very well known, is our 5th most populated in terms of volunteers post. Mongolia, I think, is our 3rd or 4th. So like our big 3 are Morocco, Thailand, and Philippines. Everyone's pretty much heard of them. But Mongolia, I mean, if you like living at 30 below in the winter, then great for you. But I can't believe the number of people that want to go there. Or they just got 12 of their current class who want to extend for a third year. So go figure. So I don't think we have data that really gives us answers to that question, Dan, but I appreciate it. Maybe something we should look in further. Some of it has to do with a new country entry like Vietnam. The medical restrictions to be one of the first classes in a new country like Vietnam or Sri Lanka are higher. So we're allowed, for Vietnam, for example, we're allowed 20 a year, and the first class was 9, the second class was 9. But now, because the medical restrictions have been lifted a bit, we have 34 potential. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you both, Lena and Mark, for your time. I'm dropping right now the Each One Reach One campaign link. If you want to take a look, see if you can help us spread the word about Peace Corps. And I'm going to pass it back to Carla now.
Thank you again, Mark and Lena. I mean, just great job. Really interesting. Lena, I loved looking at the historic, the way you presented the historic information on Morocco. And it's just exciting to see how much has happened and the growth and the trajectory of the program. So congratulations and good luck with taking it to the next level over the next few years as you take that leadership on. We have 5 minutes, so I am going to just would like to say 2 things. First, thank you to Peace Corps. This represents a clear collaboration between the National Peace Corps Association and the Peace Corps Agency. I believe everybody on the call knows, but I'm going to say it formally. The National Peace Corps Association is the association, the umbrella association of affiliate groups that are primarily returned Peace Corps volunteers or people who've worked for Peace Corps or somehow some type of allyship with the organization. And so this relationship, in my mind, is a very natural relationship because we all have one thing in common, our love for probably the international environment, but what ultimately the Peace Corps stands for. And so just for those of you who are not members of the National Peace Corps Association, we encourage you to join. Our membership is free. There is one level that is free, but we also have mission partners who are individuals who are also, they're, in addition to getting benefits, additional benefits, are really supporting our ability to continue our mission, which is to support and to get the word out about the Peace Corps itself. And to continue to just spread that message. We also provide different services. For example, we have just entered into a contract with Next Step Travel, which supports travel to countries, and the first country we'll be going back to actually is Morocco. That trip is in April 2025. We're now organizing it, and a part of it is to go visit a Peace Corps site. So I'm sure they'll be in touch with you, Lena, to be able to learn. So it's not just about, you know, going and seeing the tourist sites, but really to reconnect with communities and understand communities and continue that richness that Peace Corps allowed us, which is understanding other cultures, right? And so that is all part of the National Peace Corps Association mission, and to support our affiliate groups who are doing incredible work, whether it's in country or outside of the country, meaning the countries that they served in, to continue their service. So that supporting that third goal of continuing to continuous service through for life. We have over 130, maybe 140, 150 affiliate groups that are a part of the organization, and they represent over 70,000, maybe more individuals. They come together to advocate on the Hill for Peace Corps. So there's a lot of richness that our collective community has, and we are able to really, as a group, keep the voice and to keep the message of Peace Corps alive. So I encourage everyone to join and to know that, you know, Peace Corps and the National Peace Corps Association, we have a formal MOU. So we are formally working together because there is a collective message that we are continuing to promote our values, a set of values. With that, I am going to close this out. And again, a big thank you to our Peace Corps colleagues our headquarter colleagues, those in the field, as well as everyone who's on the call who is part of the Peace Corps family. Thank you. And have a wonderful rest of your day.